It was a crisp morning in New York when John Cena walked onto the set of a popular morning talk show. The wrestler-turned-actor waved to the audience, smiled, and adjusted his tie. To the world, he was the man who never gave up. Strong, confident, charismatic. But that morning, the host promised something different. "John," the host said, leaning forward, "we've got something special for you. A letter. It arrived from the president of Burkina Faso. Do you want to hear it?" John looked surprised, brushing a hand over the lapel of his suit. "A letter? From Burkina Faso?" The host nodded and pulled out an envelope. Cream-colored, edged in gold, its surface bearing a crisp stamp and an unmistakable seal. President Ibrahim Trrower asked if we could read this aloud. Will you allow it? John felt a wave of emotion he didn't quite understand. He nodded slowly. "Of course," he said, voice deep and wary. The host unfolded the letter and began reading aloud. "Dear Mr. John Cena, my name is Ibrahim Trrower. I am the president of the transition in Burkina Faso. But this letter, it is not from a president. It is from a boy who watched you many years ago on a small television in a dusty room. A boy who learned to rise because you refused to stay down. I watched you stand after every fall, not because you liked pain, but because you refused to be defeated. You became more than a wrestler for me. You became proof. Proof that strength can arise from silence. Proof that a boy from nowhere can one day stand tall. Today, I lead a nation that knows pain, a nation that needs strength. And I carry with me the lessons you gave long ago, Mr. Cena. Not lessons about fighting, but about rising. Not about beating others, but about defeating despair within ourselves. If this letter finds you, I want you to know this. You were a hero to a boy you never met. And that boy became a man. And that man became a president. And that president still finds strength in the man who refused to stay down. Thank you, John Cena. From Burkina Faso. And from my heart, Ibrahim Trrower. As the words settled in the room, an electric silence took over. The camera panned to John. He was looking down, hands pressed tight together. His jaw was shaking. Slowly, he brought a hand to wipe a lone tear from his eye. "Wow," he breathed, voice quivering. I never knew." The host didn't fill the silence. The crowd didn't clap. It felt like the air itself was holding its breath. John clenched the edge of the table, swallowing hard. "People forget," he said quietly. "Behind every wrestler, every character, there's a kid. A kid hoping someone sees him. I had no idea that somewhere across the world, someone was watching. Someone was finding strength in my struggles." He shook his head, voice breaking. "That boy became a president? My God." Then he looked into the camera. "President Traoré, Ibrahim, you have no idea. You just gave this man a reason to remember why he started. Thank you. Thank you for reminding me that every match, every moment we give, can change a life we may never meet." The host gently placed the letter in John's hands. The audience rose in applause, but John remained seated, holding that piece of paper like it was sacred. The letter becomes a bridge. A week later, in a quiet room in Tampa, John Cena sat down with a pen and a crisp sheet of paper. The world knew him for strength, bravado, and resilience. But tonight, he felt like that boy he used to be, shy, hopeful, and searching for words. He began to write, "Dear President Traoré, you called me a hero, but your words reminded me that heroes are not born. They are made by moments, by pain, by rising when no one is watching. To think that somewhere in Burkina Faso, a boy watched one of my matches and found strength. It humbles me. It shakes me to my core. Whatever strength I gave you, you have returned tenfold. You are a beacon of hope for a people, and now, for me too. I am a man with scars. I've fallen more times than I can count. Yet your words have reminded me that every fall can have a purpose. I don't know your land, Mr. President, but I am ready to walk it. To stand with your people, to carry the message that strength is found in resilience and true victory is found in kindness. Thank you for seeing the boy in me. Let me now come and stand with the boy in you. Yours in strength and humility, John Cena." He placed the pen down, hands shaking slightly, and sealed the letter. The next morning, it was on its way across oceans and borders, the call that crossed continents. 2 nights later, John was winding down when his phone rang. An unknown international number appeared on the screen. He answered with a cautious, "Hello?" A deep voice came through, rich with emotion. "Mr. Cena, this is Ibrahim Traoré." A pause. The sound of breathing across the line felt like a bridge between worlds. "Mr. President," John said quietly, rising from the couch. "Thank you for calling. I don't have words for how your letter impacted me." Ibrahim's voice softened. "And I have no words for the strength you gave a boy long ago. You gave him a reason to stand when life felt too heavy to bear." A silence. Not the awkward kind, but the holy kind. The kind that lives between moments that matter. "John," Traoré continued, voice strong, "would you come to Burkina Faso? Not for politics, not for publicity, but for the heart of it. To walk among the people, to speak to the youth, to help them find strength as you helped me." John felt a lump rise in his throat. "Yes," he said, voice breaking. "I'll come. Not as a wrestler or an actor, but as a boy who learned to stand and wants to help others do the same." Burkina Faso, the journey. A few days later, John Cena stepped off a small plane onto the tarmac in Ouagadougou. The sun was blazing, and a faint veil of dust shimmered in the air. Yet it felt like stepping into a new chapter, one shaped by a boy who refused to give up, and a president who refused to forget. President Traoré met him on the tarmac. No cameras, no entourage. Just a handshake, strong and warm, that felt like a promise. "Welcome, my brother," Traoré said. "Thank you for having me," John replied, voice subdued. "I'm honored to be here." They traveled through the city and out to rural villages. John met farmers with hands hardened by work. teachers surrounded by laughing children, and families grappling with loss and poverty. In every glance, every shy smile, John felt echoes of the boy he used to be. Then came the moment that would redefine him. A boy named Karim. In a village where the buildings were worn, but the hearts were strong, John met Karim, an 11-year-old boy with a shy smile and deep, searching eyes. Karim clutched a torn photo of John from an old wrestling poster. The boy spoke no English, but words weren't needed. President Traoré introduced them. Karim's father was a farmer. He passed away trying to protect his family from armed rebels. Karim lives with his aunt and younger sister. He knows every word of your interviews. He says you taught him how to be brave. John sank to one knee, swallowing hard. "You're brave, Karim," he said, voice shaking. "Braver than any champion I've ever met." He placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "If I can give you one thing, it's this. Whatever this world takes from you, don't ever let it take away your heart. Stay strong, stay hopeful, stay kind. You're already a hero." Karim stepped closer and wrapped tiny arms around John's broad chest. The sound that came from the boy was muffled, a mixture of relief and belonging. John felt tears sting his eyes and didn't fight them. In that moment, amid dust and silence, a boy from nowhere and a man from everywhere met in the sacred space where strength and vulnerability are one. The gathering of young warriors. That evening, John stood in an open courtyard. Hundreds of young faces watched him, hopeful and wary. President Traoré introduced him simply. "This man came here not because he had to, but because he chose to. Not because we gave him a title, but because long ago he gave one boy strength, and tonight he gives it to all of you." John stepped forward, voice shaking but strong. "I am not a hero. I am a man who has fallen down more times than I can count. But every time I got up, it was because I believed that tomorrow could be better than today. Not for applause, not for glory, but for moments like this. Moments when a boy looks at the world and says, 'I can stand too.'" He looked out at the crowd and smiled through misted eyes. "I don't know all your names, but I promise you this. Every scar you carry can become a story of strength. Every loss can teach a lesson of love. And every boy or girl here can rise, no matter how many times life tries to hold you down." A quiet wave passed across the courtyard. Then came applause. Not the stadium applause he was used to, but a slow, heartfelt clap that built like a drumbeat. It was the sound of belonging. That night, after the gathering, John Cena and President Trrower sat quietly on a low stone wall, the stars glistening above Burkina Faso's dark skyline. The air was warm, filled with the faint hum of crickets and the whisper of a soft breeze. Traoré spoke first, voice low. "I watched you tonight, John. The way the children looked at you. It reminded me of the boy I was when I watched you for the first time. Do you ever wonder how far a moment can travel?" John smiled faintly, brushing a hand across the dust that lined the stone. "More times than I can count. Sometimes you don't know where a word, a glance, or an act of kindness can land. And then one day, halfway across the world, it finds a boy and gives him strength, gives him a chance to rise." He looked at Traoré. That boy became a president. What greater honor could I ask for? The president tilted his head, brushing a hand across the edge of his shirt. "What about you, John? What gives you strength?" Don was quiet for a long moment. The moments when I remember that a boy from nowhere can matter. The moments when I remember that pain can teach grace. And moments like this, when I can stand beside a man who refused to be defeated, not by guns, not by politics, not by despair. Traoré smiled, and for a moment both men fell silent, listening to the whispers of the wind and the soft crackle of a distant cooking fire. In this land, Traoré said quietly, there are countless stories like Karim's. Stories of loss, of fear, but also of resilience. Will you help us build a place where those stories can find strength? John looked toward the stars and nodded slowly. Yes, whatever I can do, whatever strength I can give, whatever voice I can lend, we can build it together. Not for the cameras, not for glory, but for the boy who feels invisible tonight. The boy I used to be. The boy you used to be. The Hope and Courage Center. 2 days later, John stood beside Traoré as a ribbon was cut for a modest but hopeful building. The sign read, The Hope and Courage Center, a place for young hearts to rise. Inside, classrooms and sports areas promised a future brighter than the present. The walls were lined with photographs, one of a young John Cena making an entrance in the wrestling ring, and another of Traoré as a boy, standing shyly beside a tattered TV. Between them, a collage of smiling children from across Burkina Faso. John spoke to the gathering crowd, voice shaking with emotion. This is not about victories in the ring, not about medals, titles, or glory. This is about the victories that matter, victories in the heart. Today, thanks to President Traoré and every person here, we give the next generation a place to rise from pain, from doubt, from fear, to rise towards belonging to themselves and belonging to this world. He stopped, voice breaking slightly, because every boy and girl deserves a chance to rise, just like I did, just like the president did, just like Karim will. Karim stood nearby, holding a piece of paper with a drawing he'd made, a picture of himself, a picture of John, and a picture of Traoré. Underneath it, in wobbly letters, were the words, "Even lions can rise when they walk together." John felt tears sting the corners of his eyes. Traoré placed a hand on his shoulder. "This is how we win, John. Not with punches, not with weapons, but with moments like these. Together." The final farewell. As John prepared to leave Burkina Faso, the sun was setting in shades of amber and crimson. Karim stood at the edge of the small runway, holding a tiny, handmade lion pendant. He pressed it into John's hand. "Thank you," the boy said shyly, "for showing me that it's okay to be strong and okay to cry." John pulled Karim into a hug, swallowing hard as the boy pressed his head against John's chest. "Thank you, Karim. You gave this lion a heart. Never forget how strong you are." President Traoré watched as John waved from the steps of the small plane. The two men exchanged a nod that spoke more than words ever could. It was a bond, a reminder that across nations and across borders, Strength finds strength. A new mission. Days later, in a quiet dressing room in New York, John unfolded a letter that had arrived from Burkina Faso. It was from Traoré, and it read, "My brother John, the Hope and Courage Center is open, and every day it welcomes new young hearts. They walk through its doors knowing that strength is born not of victories in the ring, but of victories in the heart. What you gave us was more than a visit. You gave a boy a voice. You gave a president a reminder. You gave a nation a reason to stand tall. You will always have a place here, not as a visitor, but as a brother, not as a hero, but as a symbol that scars can teach strength and pain can give rise to purpose. Until we meet again, walk strong, walk proud. You are not just John Cena, the wrestler, the actor, the man. You are John Cena, a beacon for the boy who felt unseen, and in doing so, you have helped countless others rise. The lion is strong because it knows its scars. The boy becomes a man because he embraces his pain. Together, we rise." Ibrahim Traoré. John pressed the letter to his chest and closed his eyes. Not because he felt like a hero, but because for the first time in a long time, he felt whole. Epilogue: The Ripple Effect. 6 months later, in a quiet room in Burkina Faso, Karim stood smiling. The Hope and Courage Center was alive with laughter, and the boy held a book he was learning to read. Its pages featured a picture of a lion rising from ashes. In New York, John walked down a quiet street in the early morning, hands deep in the pockets of a well-worn jacket. Somewhere across the world, a boy he met and a president he came to call a brother were building a brighter future. Because across borders, across scars, across moments that break and moments that heal, a single truth had been born. Even lions cry. Even warriors rise. Even broken hearts can teach the world to beat stronger.